Welcome back. For a few months now, the United States and China have imposed tariffs worth billions of dollars on goods from both countries. The U.S. accuses China of unfair trade and theft of intellectual property, which China denies. At the IMF World Bank Spring meeting, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde said the biggest danger from the trade dispute between the U.S. and China is a threat to global confidence and investment.
In terms of impact of the trade tensions, frictions, and threats on the global growth, some modeling has been done, and the actual impact on growth is not very substantial when you measure in terms of GDP. We're talking about decimals in most cases. What is more important is something that is difficult to measure in the short term, and that has to do with the erosion of confidence. When investors do not know under what terms they will be trading, when they don't know how to organize their supply chain, they are reluctant on investing. And as I told you in the very beginning, growth is currently being driven by more investment than we had seen in the previous years and more trade. So why damage those two engines that are effectively working for growth?
Ambassador Joe Keshi, a former permanent secretary at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, talked to me about the impact of the tensions. Ambassador Keshi, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
A number of products will be already affected by tariffs imposed by the U.S. and by China. When is it time to say enough is enough? Because it's really beginning to affect political and diplomatic ties.
You know, there are those who believe, for example, that what is going on is setting the stage for negotiation. And some are even saying that this might be everybody sticking to his negotiating position. If this is true, it means that somewhere along the line, you know, the two countries will find time to sit at the negotiating table to resolve these issues. But let me also say this: they've had a platform from second Bush, in which these issues were being discussed, and they've compelled China to change some of its trade policies. And this has been going on. The dialogue has been going on even both under President Obama. It was only last year, you know, or at the beginning of Trump's administration, that platform was abandoned. So they have a platform that they could actually go back to and utilize to resolve, you know, their trade, differences.
President Trump imposed additional tariffs on Chinese products up to $100 billion. And this was after China announced, that it was going to introduce tariffs on 106 U.S. products, including soybeans, cars, and whiskey. President Trump has said that this move could hurt American workers. Analysts have said, yes, it will affect American workers. Do you think this is really about America, or this is about President Trump's ego at play here?
This is a complex and complicated situation. Yes, you could say it's about Trump's ego as well, because, as I said earlier, there's a platform that he could have used, you know, to engage the Chinese. But it's also about the deficit, you know, trade deficit between the United States and China, which it's to the disadvantage of the United States. It's about employment, actually, in both countries, because the more U.S. company outsource to China, it creates unemployment in the United States. At the same time, the Chinese want to increase, you know, their standard of living while maintaining, reasonably low price production. There's also the issue of the fact that, you know, the Chinese, followed by the Japanese, are the greatest lenders to the Americans, to the American government. So it's a whole bunch of issues.
The market for soybeans will be hugely affected because it's grown for its numerous uses, soy flour, soy protein, tofu, even retail food products. 9 states in the United States produce soybeans, and it sold 33,000 tons, a million tons, beg your pardon, is sold to China. Who gains the most from these tariffs and who loses the most?
Well, I think the Americans eventually, and possibly, Trump and the Republicans, because what the Chinese have done in terms of choosing soybeans has been very strategic, because it really will affect the Trump constituency, the Republican constituency that Trump is trying to protect in the first instance. The Speaker of the House, his constituency is seriously affected, so also the President of the Senate leader. So if the Chinese stick to this, definitely the people of this whole area that produces soybeans will be the first to begin to cry foul. So they will be the first to actually begin to point out to Trump that, look, you're probably crazy going into this because we can't export anymore because of the high tariff in China. So on the issue of soybeans, to start with, possibly the Americans will probably be the first to begin to cry foul.
This will have a ripple effect on everything else. Wheat, cotton,
absolutely.
Frozen beef, they will all be affected by these tariffs. What can other economies do to protect themselves so that they're not affected by the two giant economies in the world?
Bear in mind that Trump is not only targeting China. Remember, it's also compiling some lists against Europe, and the Europeans have also compiled their own list of items they will impose tariff on if the Americans do eventually decide to impose tariff on Europe. So there's this threat from Trump actually, against, should we say, virtually everybody around the world. It's against Mexico, it's against Canada, it's against Europeans, it's against the Chinese, it's against Korea, it's against Japan. So somewhere along the line, I guess it was the Koreans who were clever enough to come out with a compromising position that both sides agreed on. And so this is why he has not, done anything against the Koreans. But by and large, the rest of the world are preparing to protect themselves by looking and identifying, the goods that also they will impose tariffs on. But weaker economies like us, we just have to pray that this thing doesn't get out of hand, because one way or the other will be affected.
Will this be where the new trade agreement will coming, the one that African leaders signed a few weeks ago?
No, you have to understand that the issue here actually, it's mostly in the manufacturing area. The fact that, the Americans feel that they've been compelled by cheap labor to transfer a lot of their, companies there. They produce in China and they export to the United States, which allows goods to be cheaper in the United States. So economies like ours that we do not produce anything, we probably wouldn't be that. We wouldn't benefit much, or won't have the capacity to strike at anybody who strikes at us. So it's those who have something that to use against one another that are actually going to, sit down and renegotiate whatever disagreements they have. You could see what the Mexicans are trying to do over the NAFTA. The same with the Canadians.
Yeah.
For Trump, it's about the fact that since his election and his philosophy of American first, I actually think that Trump is looking at America from the old America, where America at one point in time was not just the superpower, but number one in this, number one in that, and everything. And now he looks at America. America produces nothing much anymore. Everything has gone to China. And that's not creating jobs, in the United States. So this is one of the reasons why, apart from the trade deficit, the currency issue, to be candid, there are some reasonable arguments. It's the way he's going about it that is problematic.
This is where we end the program this week. I'm always looking forward to your comments. Send them to @Amarachi_Ubani or @Channels TV. I'll see you next time.